Yep. Yep, I did. Yep. Yep. You want to see more about it? Keep watching. Hey everyone, and welcome back. Standing next to me is the CF10 Conical Fermenter by Spike Brewing. Now, thanks to some of you out there who have watched some of my plastic conical fermenter review videos and had suggested possibly I might want to look into a stainless steel conical for a review. Well, I took your advice. I reached out to Spike Brewing in Milwaukee, just north of the border from me here, and to inquire if they'd be willing to send me one of their CF10 conicals, and they were more than happy to. As you can see here, they gave it to me on loan. I did not purchase this, and it's not a free gift. I actually have to return it to them at some point, unless I decide to keep it and buy it from them. But I'm going to be using this as part of my 5 to 10 gallon brewery upgrade project that I've been working on, where I've done some other videos on mash tuns and do-it-yourself liquor tanks and immersion chillers. I went through my Spike Brewing kettle video just recently. Well, this video is part of that as well, of that whole upgrade project, and I hope to make it a permanent addition. But for the time being, I'm going to walk through some of the features, walk it through a brew day, and give you my opinion at the end. So if you want to see more about this and what I think of it, keep watching. On the front of here, there are multiple ports, including the top 3 here, which are 1.5 inch ports, and a 2-inch port at the bottom for the dump port. So at the bottom is a dump port controlled by a butterfly valve and a locking handle that you have to squeeze and to turn. So the butterfly valve opens and closes along with this, right? The same thing for the 1.5 inch transfer port. You squeeze the handle to open and close. It's butterfly valve and it won't move without being squeezed. Above here is a thermal well with the Spike Brewing thermometer inserted in here. And to the left here is the sampling port that you can actually open and close and get a sample for a hydrometer reading or a taste test or whatever your purposes are. And all these are attached with tri-clamp fittings. So they're easy to remove, easy to clean. Not any threads on here except for behind the thermometer where it screws into the thermal well, but that's not in contact with the beer, so that's no problem, right? At the top here is the lid, which is secured by this clamp and a rubber seal underneath here. And this is hand tightened with this T-bolt handle here, or loosen and remove by unhooking the clasp here. And this helps you seal this up so it is pressurizable, and also keeps the air out for when it ferments and bubbles out the CO2. Now up here is, so this port up here is a 1.5 inch port. This could be used for multiple purposes. The way it's configured now and the way it came to me is with this 5/8 ID hose barb, and it supposedly could be used as a blow-off hose, but it could be used for other purposes and on other ports as well, because it comes off, because this tri-clamp fitting comes off just like the others do. Now up at the very top up here is a 4-inch flat piece, but it's a port. This can come off by removing the tri-clamp, and now you have a port. And I think they have a clear glass option or a clear plastic one so we can see inside. I think they also have a temperature coil version, so a temperature coil can go through here and mount to your chiller to keep your fermentation temperature under control. These ports have multiple purposes, including even removing this entirely and putting on just a rubber stopper and an airlock in the hole. Or they also have a optional accessory, which I'm waiting for, and it should be here any day now, is a pressure relief valve and a temperature gauge and a gas port, much like my spunning valve with the Fermentosaurus review I had done. So I'm going to try to use this thing in that similar fashion. I'm going to ferment in this thing under pressure and transfer under pressure, just like I did with that Fermentosaurus video. And here's the view of the inside with the thermal well here, the 2 1.5 inch ports, and of course down the very center like a drain is the 2-inch dump port. And here on the inside, like in my brew kettle from Spike, is the little etched volume markers, gallons on the right and liters on the left. So that's pretty cool. As far as walking through this process of using this fermenter, I already started that in a previous video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But it was my 10-gallon brewery upgrade project video doing my overview and first brew day, showing my new 10-gallon brew house and how I used it. But near the end of that video, I actually start to use this Conical in that video where I talk about how I pump it from the kettle into the fermenter. I talk about aeration and how I use an oxygen bottle and an aeration stone to oxygenate it, and also the splash of the fast transfer from the pump to help aerate it on the way into the fermenter. I also talk about how I added the yeast through a yeast starter already. So I covered all those points already in that video, and I don't want to rehash them here. So if you want to see those steps, go check out that video. I had some decisions to make when it came to fermentation. I had three options. I could use an airlock like I do for my carboys or other fermenters. I could use a blow-off hose, which was pretty straightforward to do since the Conical came with a 90-degree barb just for that purpose. Or I could do what I did on the Fermentosaurus and ferment under pressure. And I really enjoyed that in that video. And so I thought I'd port that over to this fermenter. And fortunately, Spike Brewing, at the time I was thinking about doing this, was already getting ready. And they have since then, and since this video has been made, a gas manifold accessory, which is got a pressure relief valve, a pressure gauge, and a gas port to pressurize the fermenter. And I thought I'd take advantage of that to also let the wort naturally carbonate on its own. I had to decide where I was going to ferment this thing. Now, there's some logistical problems with this, right? This is a much larger fermenter than a 5-gallon plastic or glass carboy or bucket, right? This is a 14-gallon capacity stainless steel device, and you cannot carry this thing around. So you have to decide carefully where you're going to ferment this thing. And basically, you're limited to the area around where you've brewed your beer, because this thing doesn't travel very far. Now, you can buy these caster accessories, so you can put it on wheels and move it around, but still, you can't get it over thresholds and up and down stairs, right? So for me, I had no choice. If I was brewing in my garage, like I do for all my beers, I had to ferment in my garage. Now, that brings up a problem for me, because in the summertime, it's too hot outside to ferment in my garage. So I had to wait for the cooler weather of October, which came, right? So that was great. My garage is heated, so I can keep the garage from getting too cold, but I couldn't do anything about it to keep it from getting too hot. So fortunately, the weather cooperated. I was able to put it off to the corner in my garage on the caster wheels that I had for this thing and wheel it into a corner and let it ferment for a couple, 2 to 3 weeks. It's been 24 hours since I pitched the yeast, and this thing is already pressurizing quite well. It's already up to 12 psi, and it's probably not going to get any higher than that because I can hear the check valve in the back left here hissing, if you can hear it too. And if you can't, I'll just give it a pull for you. There you go. And so it's doing a pretty good job. I'm impressed. After 4 days of fermentation, the pressure had dropped here, actually, as you can see. There was a peak of about 13 psi at the top of the game at about the day after fermentation started, all the way back down to about 6 now, and it continues to drop a little bit each day, which is telling me there's a leak in here somewhere. And I'm not surprised, you know, considering there's about 14 potential leak points in the system. If you count all the tri-clamp fittings, the V-clamp around the upper lid, the threaded connections, the butterfly valves, the sampling port, etc., etc. So that's 14 potential places that you have to check and double check to make sure there's no gas leaking, and that's a lot of labor and work and troubleshooting to do just to ferment under pressure. So I don't know if this is the best vessel for fermenting under pressure, but I gave it a go, right? I wanted to see if it can do it, and it can do it. It's just got to leak somewhere, and again, considering the probability of having a 1 of 14 points, possible leak points leaking on you every time you brew, I consider this might happen more often than not. So that's good to know for the future. Maybe the next time I'll do the same thing and just know this is going to happen, or maybe next time I'll just not try to ferment under pressure and instead just go ahead and use a normal airlock on this thing instead for the first week or so. After several days of fermenting, I thought I'd give the dump port a try to dump some trub out. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you know I don't care too much about getting rid of the trub from my fermenters. For as little as like the time that I ferment in them, I found that saving that step is the time savings and a hassle savings for me to not bother with. But since I have the ability with a conical fermenter to do a trub dump, I thought I'd give it a try. However, I had a little bit of an issue considering that it was naturally pressurizing. Now this is the same problem I had before with the fermentosaurus, folks, right? The trub wanted to come shooting out of there. So this time I purged the air or the gas out of there, got the pressure back down to 0, and opened the dump port down below into my wallpaper tray, assuming that the flow will go straight out for a ways and splash into my nice tray and it'll be all nice and clean. However, that wasn't the case for me. Opening the 2-inch dump valve, the butterfly valve, as soon as I started to crack it, it started spraying everywhere. It got all over the floor, my clothes, and being that I'm in a concrete floor in my garage, concrete's very porous, it was hard to clean up. I had to hose down my garage and all that, right? It was not as fun as I'd hoped, and I could have skipped the step, but for the sake of the video, I thought it was important to show you that feature. However, if you have a brew area with a floor drain and moppable floors like tile flooring, this would be a no-brainer. You just crank it open, dump it out of there, and shut it really quick, and you're good to go. However, I didn't have that luxury. When it came time to keg the beer, I chose to do a pressure transfer. Now this was an open pressure transfer, not a closed pressure transfer like I had done previously with the Fermentosaurus. So I do use pressure to push the beer through, but the keg had to remain open in order to fill this up. One, because there was an accessory that came with the fermenter that allowed that, and two, I didn't have the time or patience or energy to rig something up. And you know, I've been filling kegs open for years, so I figured for this one video, for this one time, I wasn't going to go through a lot of trouble to find a way to do a closed fermentation, but in the future I would consider it. However, if you're going to use gravity to drain this into a fermenter, I would highly recommend that you get their leg extensions, or at least put this thing up on a higher platform that's sturdy enough to hold all this weight for that entire duration of fermentation, because then, of course, then you can just use gravity to use the hose and go right into your keg. But since I actually had this thing already on the floor, it was already full, I didn't have leg extensions, I used the pressure transfer method, which again, I prefer anyway, but just in case you don't use that method and you use gravity, that's what I would recommend that you do, is buy those extensions. It's time to keg, folks. It's been 3 weeks since brew day, about a week longer than my usual fermentations go. That was a fault of mine, partially. I realized after 2 weeks when I was ready to keg then that I was missing a tri-clamp and a silicone O-ring for the tri-clamp fittings that didn't originally come with this keg. I actually had commandeered the original tri-clamp and O-ring for the gas manifold that I got, and then I was lacking one for the fitting for the racking part. So I had to get a hold of Spike Brewing, and they were glad to ship me the extra parts I needed. So now I have them. I'm ready to keg. So let's get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is squirt some sanitizer up in here to sanitize the inside of here, because it's not guaranteed to be sanitized after 3 weeks, right? So spray that. Now here I've already sanitized in a bucket of sanitizer my O-ring and the 90-degree attachment here. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on, something like that. Then the tri-clamp I was missing all along here, I'm going to put that on. Okay. All right, that's on there real good, I think. So I have a sanitized hose here. This is a 5/8 ID hose. I'm going to put that over. Actually, that's kind of loose. So fortunately, I brought along with me a clamp that temporarily hold it on there. You could use a silicone 1/2-inch hose. I've seen before too, but I don't have a spare silicone hose, and I do have spare clamps and hose here. So I'm just going to go ahead and screw this on. Make sure it doesn't go popping off when I put it under pressure. Okay. Now I'm going to slide the other end into one of the kegs all the way down to the bottom. And I've already sanitized these kegs off camera in the past already. I've already pressurized it, let some of the gas out. There's a small cloud of CO2 probably still floating in there. This is an open transfer. Unfortunately, this is not like what I had on my Fermentosaurus with the closed system. So this is one of the downsides, I think, of having this system here. Maybe someday they'll have, or I can maybe myself rig up a system where I can do a closed pressure transfer. But for right now, I don't have all the gear for that. It's going to be an open transfer, but it's still a pressure transfer nonetheless. Now I'm going to attach my CO2 tank gas disconnect to the gas port here. All right. I'm going to turn on my gas. I'm going to make sure it's down to a low value for starters here. So we dial it to about 2 psi hopefully here. There we go. All right. All right, here we go. Oops, still got a little bit of stuff in there, so let me go ahead and take my hose out of the keg and put it into an empty bucket off camera here briefly. There we go. That cleared it out pretty good. Put the hose back in the keg off camera here. Sorry you don't see that, folks, but let's get that going. You can control the flow rate by moving the valves a little bit, so I think that's a pretty good flow rate right about there. And it's filling, folks. Turn that off. Put it in the next one. Get it going again. All right, let's turn that off. Let's turn off the gas. It appears that both kegs are filled up almost to the very top, and I still got beer left. So I made more beer than I needed for these kegs. As I did before in my previous video on my first 10-gallon setup I've done. This was my first beer made on it, and I think I overestimated my losses or underestimated my losses. And I ended up with more beer than I expected, but hey, I'd rather have a little extra beer than not enough, right? You know, I'm just gonna go ahead and degas the rest of this end of the bucket to see how much is actually wasted here. Huh, it actually wasn't that much. Huh. Yeah, it was only just a couple inches, guys. Maybe 3/4 of a gallon, maybe at the most. So that was actually not too bad of an estimation on my part. I mean, and if I actually pushed it, I could actually fit more of this into my kegs up to the very, very top if I wanted to. But I like to leave a little headspace in my kegs for the carbonation to work a little bit better later. But not bad. When it came to cleaning this thing, I was optimistic, but I didn't know for sure how this was going to go. Considering that stainless steel is probably the best material for brewing. It's non-reactive, it's hard. You can put some elbow grease in the cleaning these things, right? But when I started going through the process, it was very different from what I've been accustomed to for many years with carboys and even more recently with the plastic Conicals. I mean, given the size of this thing, I couldn't just dump it in my kitchen sink or my dishwasher. I had to clean it in place in my garage without a floor drain in cold weather, and my hoses are disconnected because it's freezing outside, right? And so I had to painstakingly use a lot of buckets and drip trays to collect all the wash water I had to haul out from the kitchen. Now, this is no knock against Spike Brewing or stainless steel Conicals at all. Don't get me wrong. It's just my personal experience is that I don't have the setup that I need to optimally use such a device. But what also I found kind of complicated for myself in relation again to my past experience was the total number of parts in here. There was probably a couple dozen parts or more in here between the different fittings, the tri-clamps, the silicone seals, you know, so on and so forth. Trying to detach, wash, clean, count, keep track of all of that, and to reassemble it for washing, rinsing, sanitizing. It was actually a fair amount of work. And of course, given the size of this thing, it was too big to pick up. Well, if it was empty, I could pick it up. It's still kind of bulky, but I don't have a slop sink in my garage or anywhere in my house. I have a kitchen sink, which is relatively small by comparison, and so that wasn't an option to clean over there. So I had to clean everything in place with buckets and wash water carried in from out of the house, and it was not as fun as I thought it would be. I had a whole different impression of what stainless steel conicals were going to be like to clean, and this was not it. So what did I think overall? Well, I walked through and showed you some of the highs and lows of this thing. I think it's a great fermenter for the right home brewer. I say that because me giving myself that I, again, brew in my garage. I don't have access, I don't have a water supply in my garage, I don't have a floor drain, I don't have like a coated floor that I can mop up easily. And it's a heated garage, but I don't have chilling control. And now there's things out there, devices, there's that temp coil I think I mentioned before, and other ways to chill it. Of course, that requires more investment and money and time and space for all that, okay? So it's a great device, high quality, stainless steel. Who doesn't like that, right? Spike Brewing has got a good brand. I like their kettle. I've showed that in a previous video as well. I like the quality. It's a really good conical fermenter. So if you're considering this, just take heed into what I've already told you in this video. Think about it. Is it right for you? That's up for you to decide. It's not a bad product. It's a good product. It's just that it may not be right for everybody. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, let me know what you think of this thing. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I got lots of cool videos out there. And other than that, I will talk to y'all later. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out other videos on my YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe.